So I just went through this convention, and it was a tough time. And I kept saying to myself, why is there no compassion, right? And then when I had a quiet moment, it dawned on me how much there actually was, that I was just paying attention to the bad side of it. When I reflected on the good side of it, I kept having these thoughts of people and experiences that had come into my life almost as gifts, almost angelic, if that makes sense.
Yes,
during that
it does
period
to
of
me.
time.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we need to focus on the good and not the bad.
This is Jeff Burningham, and welcome to the Extraordinary Us podcast, where I talk to friends, people that you know or don't know about life. And today I'm really grateful to have a good friend in the podcast studio with me, Congressman John Curtis.
Hey, let's just go with John.
Okay, John, straight off the plane.
That's right.
Red eye?
No, I left at 4:30 in the morning. I wouldn't call that a red eye. It was a red eye the night before.
Oh, a red eye and then 4:30.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. From Miami back to Salt Lake.
Well, I was in San Francisco in between. So
San Francisco.
Yes, it was red eye out to Miami early this morning out of San Francisco to Utah because I didn't want to miss this podcast. This was like the highlight of my week.
Oh, Jeff. Thanks, John. I don't know about that, but our public servants, that's really what it is, isn't it? It is service, isn't it? I learned that running for governor even more than I already knew. But I watch you, I watch my other friends in the federal delegation and obviously in state and even local politics. It is about service.
Well, it's a labor of love for most of us. I think really everybody I know, and particularly in local politics, it's just a real labor of love. That's why I loved local government. Mayor was the best.
Yeah,
I miss
know
those
you love
days.
that.
Yeah, I miss those days.
And that's where we got acquainted. So let me remind the people the purpose of the podcast. And I really say this every time, John, to get us kind of in the right frame of mind. I started this after I ran for governor, and you followed that pretty closely, and we were in contact then. But the purpose of this podcast is to remind us that no matter our differences, and you see this, I think, every day in your job, everyone is so different, whether you're in Miami, San Francisco, Utah, back at DC, at the Capitol, we're all very different, and we don't want to minimize those differences. But no matter our differences, my belief is that at the end of the day, that we have more in common than we ever have different. Do you see that with your colleagues, even on the other side of the aisle? Or?
Jeff, I don't care what issue it is. Some of our toughest issues, when we break it down, we agree on 80%.
Exactly, but that's not what's reported.
No, and the problem is we start on the 10 or 20% where we disagree, and then we never get to the 80%. And if we reverse that, we just start with the 80%, I think the 10, 20% would be easier.
Yeah. And our media, though, doesn't report on that good stuff either, does it? It's like there's not an incentive to report on just things going along and getting along. It's pretty frustrating.
My biggest regret is that the Utahns don't see what I see in Washington, D.C. I see a lot of good people working hard, waking up, trying to serve their country. That doesn't make the news. It's not sexy. It's not, it doesn't get the clicks. And so my colleagues that stand up and yell and scream, they get the attention.
Yep, that's interesting. Because we're more alike than we are different, the second tenet of the podcast is to let's have compassion for each other. I'm sure that you have felt this. Even in politics, people, let's have compassion. I feel like maybe even John, where we live especially, is there's so much comparison. So I'm saying less comparison, more compassion for each other, because we are fellow travelers, because we do have a lot more alike than we have different. Let's exercise some compassion. Do you ever see compassion in politics? When you do, you probably break down in tears because it's so rare and you need it so badly.
So I'll tell you about an interesting experience. I just went through this convention, and it was a tough time. And I kept saying to myself, why is there no compassion, right? And then when I had a quiet moment, it dawned on me how much there actually was, that I was just paying attention to the bad side of it. When I reflected on the good side of it, I kept having these thoughts of people and experiences that had come into my life almost as gifts, almost angelic, if that makes sense.
Yes,
during that
it does
period
to
of
me.
time.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we need to focus on the good and not the bad.
Yeah, that's hard to do in our social media world, in our soundbite world. And with, like you said, what gets clicks is this outrage, this pitting of two sides against each other. And it doesn't, mercy, compassion does not rise to the top.
You don't see a lot of that in social media. No, it's too bad.
Let me just say to people that reach out to struggling politicians, what I mean by that is that are having a hard time. I texted you, John, a couple weeks ago.
Did. Yeah, it was cool. And that was one of those moments that I'm referring to when I look back and I said, wow, there were a lot of bright spots.
Yeah. And when I received those, when I was running I was so thankful, you know, I mean, just so overwhelmed and grateful. The last 10 of the podcast is to look forward with hope. Too often we let concerns of the past or fear for an unknown future, which I want to talk about the future a little bit here today, help us make bad decisions. We make decisions out of fear instead of hope and going forward in faith. I think that that's really important. Like I said, John and I have been good friends for 10 or more years now. I met John when he was the 45th mayor of Provo. Let me remind you of a couple good times we had together. Do you remember when we opened the Village together in Provo?
Oh, I was hoping you had forgotten. I remember.
Oh, no, that was great.
You remember the visit to the mayor's office?
I do. Yeah, no, I remember. Those were good times. And that was hard. That was the biggest project that Zions Bank did. I think it was in 2010. You know, we were in the middle of the Great Recession and we were still trying to do business. It was hard, but we opened it together. I remember you being there kind of poolside with Jeff, Jamie, and I when we opened it. And the Village, it's been a great success. That was fun.
It has. And no looking back on that. It's been an amazing success.
Yeah. And I remember you being supportive of me when we started the first institutional venture fund in Utah County along the Silicon Slopes, the first venture fund. And all the good, I remember you rallying for the Friday night concerts series.
I missed those. Yeah, the rooftop concert series.
The rooftop concert series. That was so fun.
Super good time.
It was a great time to be in Provo. So John was the 45th mayor of Provo. He served 2 terms from 2010 to 17. He is now a congressman of the 3rd Congressional District here in Utah. He's been there for coming up on 5 years.
Yep, exactly.
Most importantly, he has a wonderful wife named Sue, who is a very good tennis player.
Yep. We know about good wives, don't we?
Yes, we do. Both John and I know about good wives that start with S, Sue and Sally.
Sue and Sally.
And John has 6 children himself. So, John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Let's talk.
Great to be with you.
How are you doing so far? So have you always been interested in politics? Because before that, you were an entrepreneur and an operator of businesses. But about 2010... actually, in 2000, didn't you run for the state senate?
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, but you always must have had some interest.
So no, most of my life I didn't. Okay. And but I'm from a little bit of a political family. My mom was the school board president when I was young. I remember campaigning for her. My wife's family is very active in politics, and so I've been around it, and just a strong sense that hey, I should be involved in this, and I can do this.
Yeah, and so you ran for state senate. You then became the mayor of Provo. You ran for Congress, taking Jason Chaffetz's seat, who's been on the podcast, by the way, in a special election. I want to take a step high and back and say, what are your key takeaways, John? You've been in public service now for more than a decade. You've, ran and lost. You've ran and won even more. What's it like? Give us your key takeaways of politics and where we're at right now.
I tell you that I think the thing that's the hardest on me is this totally under the public scrutiny. Mm-hmm. And I'll have people walk up to me in strange places and say, hey, I know who you are. And I always have this well, okay, what did I just do? Right? Like if I was a little aggressive in getting in line at the airport, right? Is somebody watching me? Yeah. If I walk past some trash on the ground, is somebody watching me? And you have this, part of that is not bad though. It does make you be your best self, thinking that somebody's always watching. But the other part of it is it's hard to just never have that moment where you can just be yourself.
Yeah, it's hard to be on your game all the time, to have be in front of the bright lights all the time. What has that done for you, though, personally? Has it been a little bit of a personal refiner's fire? Has it made you jaded? I mean, I know there's some feelings of probably all this, but
I think there's lots of good. Like I say, feeling like you're always going to be watched does make you be your best self, right? Yeah. I think the most frustrating thing is there's also a lot of spin on who we are.
Yeah.
And when I feel like people don't really understand who I am, that's the most frustrating.
Yeah. That is hard. That it is really frustrating. People take fragments of things that they've seen or heard. Some of it's hearsay. Some of it has some of it's data that has no context at all.
Yeah.
And then they spin it to their gain.
So I'll tell you,
isn't that like the art of politics, which is very, as a non-politician myself, someone who got into the race, gosh, it kind of shows the worst of human nature.
It does. And I think what people are longing for, just tell us the facts, right? I mean, people are really longing for that. I'll tell you about an interesting experience. I was in a group and they were talking about another politician, well-known politician in Utah, and in a real derogatory sense.
Yeah.
And they said something about them, and I said, "Is that true?" And this response was, "Well, everybody's talking about it. It must be true." And I stopped him, and as a guy who has been the victim of that sometimes, I said, "Wow, we just have to recalibrate that, right? Like, just because everybody's saying it doesn't mean it's true." And that's, I think, a tough thing for politicians to carry, is this perception, right or wrong, of who we are and what our efforts are, and always trying to just be who we are.
Yeah. Well, again, John, I've known you for 15 years or so. I've always appreciated your dedication to public service. When you were the mayor of Provo, I feel like that was kind of some of the best years in Provo. It was the growth years. We're still growing tremendously, but man, wasn't that an exciting time?
There was a chemistry there that I don't know how you duplicate. It was the residents were supportive. We were just prospering as a city. It was a good time, and that doesn't happen very often in someone's life. It was a little bit of Camelot for me.
Yeah, it was magic moments.
Yeah, it was.
And then you head back to DC. What's DC really like? We've been back there together, both for politics and also just for fun, for touring and learning about our wonderful country's history, which certainly is not without challenge and nuance. I mean, that's the essence of life, people. Let's not forget that life isn't straight up and to the right. There's no life, no business, no politics, no government that's just straight and to the right. Democracy at times is messy. Life is messy. That's how it is for all of us.
Well, I think we expect and demand perfection from our elected leaders, and that's just not realistic. It just isn't. And so we're not perfect. I have many flaws. As a matter of fact, when people are talking about my flaws, I kind of laugh and I say, "Well, you missed them. You got the wrong. If you only knew, right?" But we this false sense that that you have to be perfect to be a politician just doesn't work, and that's unfortunate. But I'll tell you that the DC life that I wish people could see, that I get to see that they don't, is just the goodness of most of my colleagues. And well, I disagree in a substantial way with many of their politics, but I can tell most of them are people who wake up in the morning and say, "I want to do what's best for my country today," and they go to work with that in mind. And we have legitimate differences, and unfortunately, very little of that is in the spotlight, and the discontent and the rancor. That's what hits the spotlight. But I get to see a very different part of Washington. And people, when I first went there, said, "John, tell me what surprised you the most." And I said that there are a lot of good people there.
Yeah.
And then the follow-up would be, "Well, if there are a lot of good people, why don't you get anything done?" And my response to that is, "Well, have you ever belonged to an HOA?"
It's like a huge HOA.
It's a large HOA.
The worst HOA on earth.
Yeah, we struggle. You think about it. We struggle as a small group of neighbors to govern ourselves, right? And fence lines and heights
to agree
of tree
on things.
and things like that. And I think, okay, look, if we struggle as an HOA, imagine the struggle as a country. And I actually think the founders intended it to be difficult to legislate. And that's kind of my life. It's like I'm in a big HOA meeting every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was running for governor, there's we went through a session and there was the most number of bills ever passed. Hallelujah! Kind of applause. And who passed the most? And I think it is meant to be hard because kind of the less laws, maybe the better, right? Yeah. Like this is a land of freedom and opportunity. And anytime the hand of government interferes, it can put its weight on the scale one way or another, and often not in a good way, a productive way. And so I think there is some beauty in the process, which is messy and ugly. But I agree. One of the takeaways that I had from running for governor is maybe we don't really want a proactive governor. Maybe we don't really want like someone that's out there kind of upfront leading. I think that's critical right now for Utah because of growth, and we need smart growth. But, like these are just some thoughts that I had.
Don't you wish everybody had run for governor or
yes.
mayor? Right?
Or anything.
We would be such a different
Everyone should
community.
have to.
Right.
That would be
very, very different if everybody had that experience. And I think we would judge our politicians very differently on very different criteria. And that experience you get from running can't be replaced really any other way.
I agree.
I've always felt like more people should run for office.
I agree. What's hard, though, is we're not getting the best people to run. A lot of because of what we've spoken about. When everything in your life can be spun to the negative, when you have people that are, when social media is so divisive and ugly. I remember when I was running for governor, someone that I did not know, but I guess maybe lived in my neighborhood at some point, made this post there was some post that maybe we made, and he said, this person said, none of the neighbors like the Burninghams. And I think it was Sally actually who saw it, which made it worse, right? Yes. And it's like, oh my, look, a couple of my neighbors saw it as well and said, hey, I can see the Burninghams house right now and I love them, and or this, that, and the other. Anyways, my point is just you're taking these shots from everywhere and you don't know where they're coming or why, and you don't know if that has any basis, and it's just so. My point is that ugly process keeps the best of us out, does it not, John? Often,
I've told people all the time we're rewarding the wrong behavior in politics and incentivizing the wrong behavior. I mean, think about Sally, your wife. Like, there's no reason that she needs to read a post like that, right?
Yeah.
And that really, I mean, what does that have to do with you being a good governor? Maybe it's actually a good governor who people don't like, right? I mean, not saying that they don't, Jeff. I'm just saying that people don't get into, they don't judge us on the right criteria, and we reward the wrong behavior. And I think you would get better people running for office. Frequently, our best and brightest just wouldn't subject themselves to this.
I like that. What criteria should politicians be judged on, John? You've been doing this for a while now. Yeah. I know that you hold a lot of town halls. You're very active. You've been back in D.C. and have been a very effective legislator. What criteria should the public or the voting populace judge politicians by, in your opinion?
I wish it was more on results, not rhetoric. Mm-hmm. And too often, a good speech it carries the day with no evidence of ability to carry that out. Mm-hmm. Really very little understanding about what the office actually does. Yeah. And so people can say, well, I would do this or I would do that. and nobody really asks how, right? Or what have you done in your life to show us that you could do that? And I wish we could turn that dial a little bit off of rhetoric and put it more on just results.
Isn't that about we're kind of lazy. And again, I don't mean that might be a harsh word. We're busy. We're busy in our own lives doing our own things. This is another, I didn't mean this to be a recollection of my governor run, but this is another thing that I learned. People are busy doing they don't really care. We think people care actually more than they do. There's a very small percentage, which makes it hard, of people that maybe over care about politics. But most people they want to live their lives.
Well, you've got parent-teacher conferences, you have soccer games, you have work responsibilities, you have neighborhood responsibilities, you have church responsibilities, and you're right, it's overwhelming for most of us, and then to carve out some of that for politics, it usually just doesn't happen. And I think in Utah, there's quite a bit of, well, I'll ask my neighbor, he or she spends a lot of time in it, and I'll just lean on their what they've studied, and it would benefit all of us to spend a little bit more time understanding who we're electing and what they're doing back there.
Yeah. Are you enjoying it, John? I look at you as a friend. I know you in many different kind of settings. Obviously, you just got off the plane and you've had a horrendous weekend. Thank you for coming on the podcast. But I know you're tired. But there's got to be something you love about it. There's got to be, I hope there's something that's motivating you, that's keeping you going. I mean, the hardest thing about Congress, I've always thought this, you would agree, you're kind of constantly campaigning. I say that in quotes because every 2 years you are up for re-election. That is not a long enough cycle. I mean, I think there's I'm not saying there's not wisdom to that, but that is very hard.
It is a tough cycle, and but I will tell you. Let me answer your question because I don't want anybody to misunderstand this. Yes, I'm enjoying it. It's a pinch me experience. I walked through we had a late vote some months ago. It was on COVID, and we were voting probably about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I walked through the U.S. Capitol on my way to go vote all by myself underneath the dome. And I said to myself, is this real? Am I,
Yeah.
I have the key to the Capitol. I get just to walk in there. And it is the whole experience is a pinch me moment, honor to serve moment. And anything we do has its tough spots, right?
Yeah.
And I've done enough in life to know that where there's there's good and bad. If you look for the good, you'll find it. If you look for the bad, you'll find it.
Yeah. What do you love about it? I mean, I know those pinch me moments. I've heard you tell stories about kind of maybe running or jogging around the Capitol and saying, "I can't believe I'm here," and meaning exercising or walking. But what do you enjoy about the job? Again, you're very active in town halls. I think you enjoy connecting with people. I don't want to but what do you enjoy about it?
There's a lot. Let me just highlight one experience I had a couple of weeks ago. A number of years ago, I visited a gentleman in southeast Utah. And he reached down, he had a small business, he reached behind his counter and he pulled up a map of his city. And he started pointing to different homes. And he said, cancer, cancer, cancer. And they had a uranium mill in their town when they were growing up that wasn't protected. And as kids, he would play on the tailings and swim in the water of the tailings. And he said, all I want is for some cancer screening. Can you help me get some cancer screening? And it took me longer than it should have. But the other day I got word that we were able to fund cancer screening for his town. It won't be in the press. Nobody really knows about it. But I'm going to the rest of my life say, I had a role in bringing cancer screening to this tiny little town.
Yeah.
And that forever will be a moment that I'll hold. And that one thing alone would make it worth it, if that makes sense.
It does. And you have little moments like that along the way.
Yeah, and some of them are big. We passed a really big public lands bill, but you pass little bills along the way. You help a constituent. When COVID came, we got phone calls. My kid's stuck in Peru. Help me get them home. And all of those little cumulative things really make you put your head down on your pillow and say, oh, I'm so glad I'm involved in this.
Have you guys heard of Under Your Bed? I bet you have by now. If you're listening to the Extraordinary Us podcast, I bet you've searched for it maybe and haven't been able to find it.
It's true.
Isn't that how life is sometimes? You just can't find what you're searching for. Constantly searching.
Well, now you can.
Now we've been found. Under Our Bed is finally out. It's really there, people. So type it in right now. Search it up.
You're gonna love it.
Look for it live, subscribe, and tell your friends. Can't wait to have you there with Jeff and
Sal,
providing the comedy relief. Good night, Sal.
Good night, Jeff.
Last week, we had a guest that isn't well known, but a good friend of mine who struggled with drug addiction. And he told he's in his mid-30s now, but he told his story of how he got addicted and how it started with just some opiates that were lying around, some OxyContin or whatever. And to hear his story was very touching. And I was surprised I had a lot of feedback from that episode from families that have loved ones that are struggling with this addiction. This is another, I guess, quote unquote, sleeper issue or smaller issue, especially maybe in rural Utah, which your congressional district covers a lot of rural Utah, that I think you've made a difference in. Could you, tell us, it's fresh in my mind because of my interview with Sean, but tell us about that, how we're doing there, how we've made progress and your role in it.
Well, we've made progress, but we have so far to go. And you're right, Jeff, it's hard to find a family that doesn't have a son, a daughter, an aunt, an uncle, a parent, somebody's life that has been almost ruined by opioids. And in the rural part of my district, we saw that at even a much higher rate. Unemployment was high when I first came in. I represent a couple of counties that have been based on coal extraction, so unemployment was high. And when there's high unemployment, you see opioids at an even higher rate. So we knew we had to double down on it. We've had conferences down there. We've worked on the employment situation. I actually had a bill. I made it through Congress. It was a very simple bill, but you know that in Utah, we have the highest rate of women in pregnancies on opioid in the entire country.
We do?
We do in Utah.
Wow.
And so we were able to get a small little bill passed to get a study done to try to get to the heart of why. In Congress, we've passed, in a couple of years ago, we passed a package of 60 bills on opioid reform. And we're turning that corner. It's a corner that you'll never really fully turn, but it has been very touching to be part of that and to realize what a big deal it is. I serve on the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee as well.
Yeah.
and have a close-up look at that. And it's a tragic situation.
It is. There are two questions I want to ask from this. One might be a little hard. I just want to get but it's on my mind. Psychedelics are very interesting right now in tech. Like there's been a lot of talk about that. One of our friends, someone we knew, I wasn't able to make it, but held a little summit about this last week, a local well-known person. Have you started looking at that at all, or has Congress started looking at maybe the positive effects of some of these natural medicines or psychedelics or whatever? I know you're not an expert in this. I'm not asking you to be. I know this might be a touchy subject, but I'm just curious, is that being discussed at all, or thoughts?
It's not, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
It's overwhelmed by fentanyl.
Yeah.
Right now, fentanyl is everything on everybody's mind. We literally have floods of it coming across our southern border, and
I'm sorry, what is fentanyl exactly? I've heard of it, but
fentanyl is kind of the cheap drug right now.
Okay, got it.
It's coming from Asia,
but it's not an opioid.
No, it's coming from Asia. As it comes in, it's what happens is it's mixed with other drugs, and one of the common things that happens is it's mixed with what's supposedly a prescription drug. They mix that in there. It's not really coming from a pharmacist, but it's sold on the street as it's coming from a pharmacist, and people are dying. There's more fentanyl in the United States. There's more enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child 5 times over in the United States. And that's kind of really the focus on everybody's mind right now.
Got it. You mentioned also in the last thing about committees, and I think there's some people that people don't understand. You get back to Congress, obviously we have Congressman Blake Moore, who's young, newly elected a couple of years ago. It's kind of about the committees you get on, right? Like help people understand. You get back there and you're trying to get, give us a perspective of that.
Committees are everything.
It's kind of like the teams that I'm trying to equate it to. It's kind of like the working groups or whatever. Yeah.
So you mentioned opioids or fentanyl or these other drugs. I'm on the health subcommittee, therefore I have a lot to do with them. If you're on natural resources, you could be interested in it, but it's hard to pass a bill on it. And so your committee assignments really shape your direction in Congress. And when I first came in, I was on natural resources. I love that. I was on foreign affairs. I love that. I was on small business. I love that. But I knew I had to get on energy and commerce because my subcommittees there are health, tech. You think of Silicon Slopes and tech and all of those issues.
Yeah.
And then energy and climate, huge issue for the district as well.
Yeah. How do we make Utah the hub of blockchain? I know that people are talking to you about this, about crypto, blockchain, Web3. You probably have heard of these and are getting more familiar with this. I know that some of my friends are putting pressure on you and or talking to you about these issues, as have I a little bit. Any thoughts about that?
It's exciting. It really is. And what my aha moment is, this is not about Bitcoin. This is about a whole new financial structure, right? So for a long time, I looked at this as, okay, this is Bitcoin. Yes, it's not.
No,
of course, Bitcoin
larger.
is much larger than that. It's how every financial transaction will be conducted in the future. And we would be very wise as Utah to lead on this and not to run from it. And so you ask, well, how can we do that? State legislation, education. That's what I'm doing with your friends that are coming to me. It's like, okay, teach me. Like, I need to know everything. I need to understand this. And unfortunately, most of my colleagues don't really understand this at a deep level. Well, how can we legislate on it if we don't understand it at a deep level? So this is a chance for Utah to lead. And to lead, we've got to have elected officials who understand it, who embrace it, and are not afraid of it. It's easy to be afraid of this, but it's really, this is where the train's headed.
It is.
And you want to be on the train.
Yeah. How do you become an expert in so many things so quickly? I'm speaking for all, because you can't. It's obviously you come from whatever profession you come from. You serve for a period of time as a senator or a congressman, whatever it is. You're not, or woman, you're not an expert at everything. I mean, you can't be. But what is the method that so let's say someone comes up to you and says, Web3, Congressman, what are we doing? Yeah. You hear about all of this. What is most politicians' mechanism, or how do they get up to speed as quickly as possible? Help us understand that process, because I actually think that that's one of the most important skills a politician can have, is learning quickly and being able to parse the wheat from the chaff, and like, this doesn't matter. This is what matters on this subject. I want to champion it. Here's what, so.
So
How does
I
that
would tell you
happen?
two things. One
Yeah.
is life's experiences. Every day I rely on life's experiences. I'll give you a really good example. Provo City had this fiber network, and I inherited that.
Yeah.
And one of our peers came down and talked to me about it, and he said, "Hey, listen, we got to get gig speed." I did not know what a gig was. I didn't know what a meg was. Right. So my life experiences, because of that, I now know what a gig is and a meg. And most of my colleagues in Washington would struggle, like even with something as simple as that.
Yeah.
But my life experiences has given me some basis in all of that. The second thing is we are blessed as members of Congress that almost anybody will sit down and teach us. Right. And so being willing to dedicate the time to sit down and say, explain this to me. And then, wait a minute. I didn't understand it. Would you say that again? Right.
Yeah.
And having
That kind of takes humility.
I was just, we thought of that. It's like having the humility to say, guys, I don't understand this. Yeah. Go over it one more time. And you're going to sit at this table. Nobody walks out of this room until I understand this. And so I've been blessed with all of these mentors and these teachers who whether it's energy policy or cryptocurrency policy or whatever it is, who will spend hours and hours with me. And then it's on me after that. And I get a lot of airplane time, and that's what I do. I sit on an airplane and I Google topics, and I say, okay, what do I don't understand about this? And here's a little spot I don't understand. And I've made commitments on things like blockchain to understand it better than anyone in Congress. And then I smile and I say, don't worry, the bar is so low.
Yeah, the bar's not too high.
Yeah.
I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night, and one of the things that I came to really appreciate, it's almost like we should elect people that are I'm just going to put in the best learners, that ask the best questions. I think this is an underappreciated skill, one that, I thought that I could bring to politics or run as governor, but asking the right questions and then being able to learn and adapt quickly.
Yeah, and it's not just knowledge, it's wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. Like, what do I do?
It's applying wisdom to the knowledge you gain.
Knowledge,
yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of people can understand the block and tackle of crypto, but can you understand, okay, let's merge how is this going to impact
the ramifications?
And now
scale,
you factor in China into this and all these things. And okay, how do we navigate this?
Yes, the ramifications at scale. I love it. Let me ask you a big scale question. And if you, I can't remember who I was with recently on the podcast, but I don't know if it's Governor Cox or maybe Senator Dan McKay, but I kind of spoke, and I'm going back to blockchain and the whole, the trend is to decentralization, yes. John. I'm talking about worldwide.
Right.
Everything is decentralizing and becoming more flat. I don't care if you're a big business, a big religion, a big government. The trend of the people is decentralization. One of the manifestations of that is crypto, right? Is this digital currency that isn't controlled by a government entity. But I think that that's a symptom of even and maybe this is the biggest one, but even a larger trend of decentralization. So my question to you is I think the United States, I think a lot of the institutions that we belong to, John, in the next, let's say by the end of our lives in 30 or 40 years, whatever, will look quite a bit differently. How does government, because government's not built to react to this. And I personally think that most people in DC or elected officials don't even understand this wave of decentralization that is sweeping across the country and the world that it's going to change things. We want it to change things in a good way. We don't want it to destroy things. Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So a couple things. One of the reactions of government is, okay, we need to control this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We need to have a national currency, right?
Yeah.
Well, think about how scary this is for a minute. Is if the federal government's your bank, right? Yeah. And they know every transaction that you make, it's the wrong direction to go. So federal government shouldn't control it. They need to understand it.
Yeah.
And they need to be the entity that puts up the guardrails, right? Yeah. And maybe this decentralization will get us back to some of our core fundamental responsibilities of government, and get us away from things that we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, simplify a little bit.
Simplify, right? Which is what I think our founders intended. And so making sure that government's role in this is appropriate, and that they don't try to take it over. I think my biggest worry as I look at this future is, who does this leave behind?
Yeah.
I worry about, if you can't understand technical things, does this world leave you behind? And I think, one of my please, to the high-tech community is figure out how to do this in a way that it doesn't leave demographics or certain people behind. We're changing who makes money and how they make money. We're changing so many things. And if somebody can't catch that wave, that's what I've worried about.
Yeah, I worry about that as well. But I also think that, I'll just call it Web3, this decentralization also provides opportunities for people, especially in other countries maybe that aren't even able to provide a livable wage. Now they can do something digitally online in Web3 that people in developed countries like the United States value and buy. And so that I really am hopeful that Web3 can be this lifting out of poverty, but certainly, it definitely has the challenges of potentially going the other way.
But let's talk about that for a minute, because it is exciting. The fact that a mom and pop little Coke store in some third world country, that you could lend money to them, right? Yeah. Or that you could, that is fabulous. I still have people in my district today that don't have running water and electricity.
Wow.
So that's when I say we have to be careful.
You do?
I do.
Not that many.
More than you would think. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that when I say those are the people I'm worried about, right, who don't have that cell phone, who don't have internet, that I want to make sure don't get left behind in this.
Yep, that's a big challenge. I think the biggest challenge on everyone's mind, and leading into cryptocurrency and other things, is inflation. Talk to us a little bit about the state of inflation. At first, it wasn't happening, and then it was temporary.
Yeah, it was transitory.
I mean, I was laughing.
We came up with a new word, transitory.
Yeah, I guess I understand. I'm in the guts of the economy enough and understand the spin enough now that I've run for government, that I was kind of been laughing along this entire inflation train and just saying, this is not what's happening. How are people viewing inflation? What are you doing back in DC to help it? I don't know. Thoughts on inflation? I think this is just, this. I think this is the number one concern on people's minds right now.
So it should be. I'm a lot older than you, Jeff. I remember the 80s.
Yeah.
And I had a CD at the bank that paid me 17%.
Yeah, crazy.
Sue and I were shopping for homes, and we celebrated when we found a loan we could assume for 12. Wow. What I fear is that the people who think this is so bad, we've got worse times coming ahead. And the way that Ronald Reagan got us out of this was to increase interest rates, if you can believe it. And there's some serious pain. And I think there's nobody to blame but ourselves. We've become intoxicated with spending at the federal level. Yeah. We've become enamored with free things. We want the government to give us free things. Yeah. And you take all of that and you combine it with COVID and it's hit on supply chains and things like that, and it's the perfect storm. We've got to change behavior and start with the federal government, right? But also as consumers and individuals. And this doesn't have a happy ending if we don't come to reality really quickly.
One of the flaws, quote unquote, of the human mind, we can't understand big, like trillions.
Yes.
Printing trillions of dollars. When this was happening, I remember going to lunch with a friend of mine, and him talking about, I got this check. He was younger. Isn't this great? And I said, no, this is terrible. Do you know the cost of that check to you? So and I did a quick little napkin. I can't remember the details because it's a year and a half ago. But we kind of calculated that he will pay like 5x whatever he's getting in his lifetime down the road.
It's worse than that. So think about this. Okay, we spent $1.9 trillion as a government. That every $1 trillion is roughly $5,000 for every man, woman, and child. So we spent about $8,000 or $9,000 and handed him a check for $1,400, and then we won't pay it back. So by the time he's 30 years from now, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people they want free things. That was very popular, handing out free money. You notice now the elections are coming up, we're talking about relieving student debt. Why? Because it gets votes. And it's just we've not done a good job of educating.
Do you have hope that we can back ourselves out of this, John? I mean, it just seems like such a runaway freight train we cannot have this positive podcast and end on anything less than a really positive note. So let me bring some hope to this discussion. Yeah, okay. Right? I hear all the time, it's never been so bad. And I say to myself, really? Civil War? Really? It's never been so bad? I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah.
Watergate, the race riots, right? The Depression, the Great Recession. We've gone through some bad patches as a country. And this is what's so critical. Every time we have emerged a better country than we went into it. And I have absolute confidence in our form of government, in the Constitution. And so that doesn't mean we don't have troubled times. That doesn't mean we don't have pain ahead of us. But I do have absolute confidence in the greatness of this country and the ability to do what I call self-healing. And I actually think we're just one great leader away from turning this corner. Somebody who will unite us as a
Do you see that person on the horizon? I mean, you don't name, but is there a woman or man out there? I mean, I'm sure there is, but I don't. Anyways.
So I'm a Republican. So I tend to think Republican nominees. I could name a half a dozen who could lead this country, and I think be outstanding.
Okay.
Whether or not they'll get that opportunity, we'll have to see. But there are some talented people out there. And I think the country is yearning for that type of leadership, and I'm hoping that we can supply it.
We need it. Talking about leadership, can we talk about climate real quick?
Sure.
I don't know why. I'm a Republican as well. I don't know why you can't say climate and not be I mean, and I don't know also too how it's not obvious that there's climate change. Now, there's always been climate change, I believe, and the cause of that climate change is something that's up for discussion and understanding with the help of scientists, et cetera. But why can't you be quote unquote conservative or Republican and talk about climate? I think you should be able to, and I think you're doing that, John. So congratulations. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Here's what happened to me. I went to Congress, and I was just slammed with, you don't care about the earth, you deny the science, Republicans, want to destroy the earth. And I knew that was absolutely not true. I love to call Utahns the best environmentalists in the world. They hate that title because they don't like the word. But here's what I believe what's happened. Climate has been associated with extremism and the Green New Deal and what I call take your head off to fix the headache type solutions. So Republicans run from it. Right. They don't want to talk about it. It feels like if you say climate, that you're embracing the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
I've found that's been a huge mistake. A, it's branded us as not caring, but B, it's not put conservative ideas out there for debate.
Yeah.
So I've started this movement to get Republicans talking about climate because I think the science is actually on our side. I think that the facts are on our side. And let me give you one really quick example. U.S. natural gas is 40% cleaner than Russian natural gas. We could reduce emissions dramatically by simply exporting U.S. natural gas to replace Russian natural gas. Conservatives can get their arms around that, right?
Why don't we do that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Is that
right?
not a picture?
And it builds national security. It makes us energy independent. It's good for the economy, and it reduces emissions. Come on, Republicans, let's talk about this. Yes. Another thing is nuclear. We love nuclear.
Are Democrats open to that? Sorry, that thought you just said. Like, are they more open to it with the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
It's certainly been a little bit of a sea change because they're seeing what's happened to Russia. So just quickly, what's happened to Russia? Nuclear is bad. Let's shut it down. Fracking's bad. Let's not do it. Okay, so fine. Now you're buying fracked natural gas from Russia. How do you feel about that decision, right? all of your nuclear power has been replaced with Russian dirty fossil fuels. They have not been good decisions in Europe, and we're making those same decisions here. Yeah. And this is why Republicans need to stand up and say, hey, wait, we do care about emissions. We do care about pollution. Our ideas actually reduce dramatic amounts of it, and they don't kill the economy. They keep us energy independent. And that's why I'm so excited about what I'm doing. And you're right, I do take a few hits because I dare use the C word.
Yeah.
But I think Republicans have got to start talking about it and not run from this. We shouldn't be afraid of the facts here.
Yeah, well, I think the C word that sticks is courage. So thanks for having some courage and saying that because it's not always politically expedient. But again, let's have some sound ideas. Just the argument that you just made, and again, I think the conflict between Russia and Ukraine highlights this.
Oh, absolutely.
We're a global citizen. The world is flat, so to speak. We're all contributing to that. Yeah, we can either buy dirty fuels from other countries that are way less, way less clean than what we could produce here in the U.S., or we could produce as wisely as possible within the United States.
2 points I want to make. Imagine the hypocrisy of importing Russian natural gas to the United States. We were importing hundreds of thousands of barrels just a few months ago and shutting down U.S. fossil fuels. And I represent all these communities. I see what's happened. Second thing is, remember we started this podcast with talking about there are far more areas where we agree on.
Yeah.
I have many Democratic colleagues who are very helpful to me on this, and I try to be helpful to them. They're not in this extremist category. They too understand this. And we can find a lot of common ground here with very thoughtful people on both sides of the aisle here. And that's the conversation I'm trying to participate in and be part of. And that's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last political question,
Sure.
then one other question to bring us home. So we have two more.
Okay.
Give us a little, and it's May 2nd when we're recording this, give us a little insight into Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, you can't spill everything, but give our listeners, I think I have a feel, what an amazing just story, what a sad story. I mean, it's,
a couple of things. There has been a change in U.S. posture in the last few weeks. What most people don't understand is behind that posture is when this war started, all of our experts said that Ukraine will fall in a couple of days. They all told us that. It will fall in a couple of days. Mm-hmm. Ukrainians fought.
Yeah, good for them.
And the posture that's different in the United States is, it's not said out loud, but you can tell from our actions, we now think Ukraine will win.
Yeah.
And that is really
will
cool.
win.
Will win. And that doesn't mean it won't be sloppy. It doesn't mean many people won't be hurt. And terrible things will happen, but the tide has turned, and the United States actually thinks Ukraine will win. The second point I'd like to make on this is a unique opportunity for the United States because too many of those alive in the United States today don't know the cost of freedom.
Yeah.
And we're seeing, without paying the price, how valuable freedom is, and it's costing us very little. It's borne on the backs of these Ukrainians. But this should be a teaching moment for us and for our children to say, that's the cost of freedom. We must preserve and protect it because if we're not careful, it's fragile and we could lose it too. And we have this perfect opportunity for this teaching moment.
I love that. That's a great way to look at it. Yeah. Is this going to be it's going to be prolonged, it seems. It's going to go on much longer than was expected. I think every day that it continues to go on, Russia gets weaker and it's less and less of a win for them.
Correct.
I'm afraid, though, that we're going to have to give Putin something to kind of save ego or face, right, to go back to his people. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know.
I've thought about that, but the reality of it is we have to be very, very careful here that there is no win in this for Putin. And I say Putin because it's not the Russian people, it is Putin.
Yeah.
The Russian people are victims themselves, as they are with any dictatorship. And Putin cannot be rewarded for this in any way, shape, or form. And I get what you're saying because I've thought that same thing. How do we let him just withdraw and be done with it? He's gone so far. I'm not sure that can happen right now.
Interesting. Okay, John, we've spanned the gamut today. I want to end with, what gives you hope for the future? You spoke about that a little bit. You spoke about America, but what about for you personally? Again, you have a beautiful wife who's just an amazing go-getter and a lot of the engine and fire behind you, which any person does. Their spouse is so important to anything that they do. You have 6 beautiful children. What are your greatest hopes for them into the future? Thoughts to just take us home on anything we haven't covered or anything that's been on your mind.
So this is what drives me is this exact question is how do I give my kids and my grandkids what I had growing up? The financial opportunities, the freedom, the beauty of nature. That's one of the reasons that I'm so engaged in this whole discussion about our environment is what is my role in making sure they have the same America that I grew up in? And I actually came to Provo because it reminded me of the Salt Lake I grew up in, right? and that uniqueness is forever lost that I had there, and unfortunately Provo's growing now.
Yeah.
And
you're gonna have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's what I desire most is that my kids and grandkids have everything that I had growing up.
Well, I see that in your actions every day. I see that in your words. I've seen you in action. I've seen you speak. I've always respected you, John, and appreciate your service to the country. No, you never agree 100% with any public official.
But
it doesn't mean you have to give them. Right? You don't. That doesn't mean you have to. Can't give them the benefit of the doubt. That you can't know that they're coming from a good place. And we appreciate your service, John.
Well, you're the best. You're good for my ego, Jeff. And quite frankly, I need that. So.
Yeah, I'm building you up here, John. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, best to you, Jeff, and your family, and Sally, and your beautiful family, and appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks, John. I hope you enjoyed this podcast with Congressman John Curtis. He's in the middle of campaigning. Campaigning is never easy. It's rarely fun. I love connecting with people. I love people. That's one of the reasons I ran, but it is so hard. You also see the worst in humanity at times, like we spoke about. I think it's so critical when we're engaging in politics to remember one of the tenets of this podcast, that no matter how we think differently, we're all a lot more alike. We have more things in common. Let's build from that and then try to come to constructive solutions to where we disagree. I really loved John is a worker. I hope you sense that. He flew from, we were supposed to podcast on Friday. It's Monday, by the way. He had to reschedule because he had an overnight red eye to Miami, spoke to a group there, then flew to San Francisco, and then landed this morning, early this morning, Monday morning, and ran right here to do this podcast. Our elected officials are special. No matter what side of the aisle, they are doing this for very little. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt, is my general feeling. Is John perfect? Heck no. Is anyone perfect? No way. Are you going to agree with any politician completely? Obviously not. If you're married or in a serious relationship, you know that, already. No one sees things exactly the same, but I was heartened by his forecast, by the way, on the Ukraine-Russia conflict. It's been amazing what the Ukrainians have done, and their president Zelensky has been unbelievable. His story is inspiring. And is a good reminder of the price of freedom. Freedom isn't free, and we live, even if our country has faults, the history is messy. Any history of any organization or life at times is messy. That's how it is. But that doesn't mean, in my opinion, that we should hide it, that we should run from it. It means that we should try to get better from it. And I think, by and large, we are in America, and we are in the world. I agree with John. There have been darker days than this. This is a scary time with inflation, with the war that we spoke about, but there's so much good in the world. I love John's work ethic. I know him personally and believe that he is doing his very best. And what else more could we expect from an elected official than to just do their honest, best work? I also love, at heart, his idea, you've got to just try to understand the issues and then maybe provide guardrails as a government. If you get too far in and entrenched, I think you cause problems. You infringe freedoms, which should be the opposite of our goals. I think we want less government in our lives, not more. I appreciate John's efforts to do that. I appreciate his efforts in the opioid epidemic, which we spoke about, and many other good things. Hope you learned something. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you have compassion for whatever side that you're on, Republican or Democrat. And please share with a friend that could use this. Talk to you again soon.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Us Podcast with Jeff Burningham. Please help us grow by leaving a rating and review and subscribing at your favorite podcast platform. Also, tell your friends and share on social media. See you again next week.
Sally.
Jeff.
I heard you jumped out of a plane. Is that true?
That's true.
You can hear all about it on Under Our Bed. Sally skydiving in Dubai.
It's hard to believe, but it's true.
It is true. We have a podcast called Under Our Bed. We hope you'll check it out. Subscribe in 2022. We talk about important and funny things.
Yes, like skydiving, like when someone you love dies.
Yeah,
Lots
which was
of
sad.
We cover
We
the
cover
gamut.
life.
Yeah.
If you're interested about life, if you want to hear a couple talk about life, come join us, Jeff and Sal, Under Our Bed.
You will love it, I guarantee.
Love you, Sal.
Love you too.
Good night.
Good night.